All right, let's head over to the Zoom line where we got Mr. Jim Willis on the line with us. How you doing today, Mr. Jim Willis?
Hey, I'm doing great, Jason. How are you?
Pretty good. How's Marcellus Drilling News doing? It's marcellusdrilling.com, Marcellus Drilling News, right?
That is correct. Yep, yep. I
Uh,
just, shortened the URL a little bit, so just Marcellus Drilling will get you there. But if you type Marcellus Drilling News in any search engine, you'll find it too.
the
So
beauty part is about marcellusdrilling.com versus marcellusdrillingnews.com is you have a security net that if you ever want to sell it, I'm sure there's an oil and gas company that will pay you a pretty penny for
well,
marcellusdrilling.com.
well, maybe someday, that would be a nice retirement thing, right?
Which gets us to our kind of our headline story, which is that might not be worth very much in the state of New York these days. That governor, holy
Well,
smokes! I saw a headline
mhm,
and I didn't even read the story. I figured I'd get you on to dissect this a little bit, and it had to do with the
sure.
governor fining traditional energy sources like oil and gas for existing. And that
Yeah,
seems like what's happening here is that if you're they call them fossil fuel companies. I like to call them traditional energy or oil and gas, type of a thing.
hmm hmm
And it just seems like, boy, they're really getting state sponsored shaming in New York.
that's for sure. Yeah. It's I don't know. Where do you begin? So there's no new ideas on the left, right? It's all recycled. So what our governor is Kathy Hochul, and she came to power after Andrew Cuomo fell from grace, and had to resign, and she was the lieutenant governor. She's from Western New York, Buffalo area, and you would think she would have a little more smarts when it comes to economics and seeing how all this works in upstate New York in particular, especially in her neck of the woods. There's quite a, at least used to be quite a bit of gas drilling out in Western New York. So, but she's caved and beholden to really the radical left and environmentalists in particular. So the legislature, which is controlled by, we have Democrat Senate, Democrat Assembly, which is our lower house, Democrat governor. So it's a trifecta here in New York State. And so the legislature passed a bill, and it's called, and I wanted to make sure I had the right name here, the Climate Change Superfund Act. So, they fit all their favorite words in there. And it's modeled loosely on, like the tobacco settlements, of yesteryear and things like that. Or in the Superfund, when way back when there was, companies were found polluting, and the government went after them and created a big fund to set up so that they could clean up this pollution. Well, that's their theory here. From if you put yourself in their head, they want in essence a slush fund, and they want to clean up. I don't know, the climate, right? So because these companies have contributed to climate change, so and everything gets blamed on climate change, from storms that come through that we've had forever, hurricanes and things like that, and all sorts of damage, thunderstorms, rainstorms, snowstorms, whatever. They want a slush fund to hand out to friends and family, and this is the way they want to build it. So this bill identifies 38 oil and gas companies, companies like Exxon and Chevron here in the United States, and Shell and BP, that are UK companies, and Equinor in Norway, and Total in France, really the big, the super majors, plus some others have been identified, and they will be sent a bill for $3 billion a year, each one of those companies, and they'll need to pay that bill over the next 25 years, which amounts to about $75 billion. So it's ludicrous. And as I wrote about this on my site, they're never going to pay. And what will happen now is all sorts of lawsuits will ensue, and it'll take a number of years. And the lawyers will get rich, as the lawyers always get rich. And it'll just be wound up, for quite a while. But it sends a very loud and clear signal to the oil and gas industry. You're just, New York's closed for business. You're not welcome here. And it's just it's a shame.
And who's this governor again? What's her name?
Her name is Kathy Hochul, Hochul.
Where did she come from? And the reason I ask is because I can honestly say, and I've said this a number of times, and I feel very passionate about this, is that if you look at the way energy policy is going on the extreme, I guess it'd be left would be the right way to say it, is that they seem to really try it on the coast, either New York or California, and then they roll it out in Colorado, or they roll it out in one of those Midwestern blue states. And so is she connected with this kind of connection of California, New York, Colorado? Is she part of that Colorado blueprint with Jared Polis?
Yeah, well, there are other states that are doing this, that are trying this. I believe Vermont was the first.
Okay.
And
Minnesota?
Minnesota may be in there.
Okay.
I'm not sure. California's in the mix. So yeah, they kind of travel as a pack. Yep, absolutely.
Man, I tell you, it's something else when we really take a look at it. And how many? I mean, what do you know the percentages of what powers the state of New York? I mean, is it like in North Dakota, for example? It's like seriously 90 to 95% coal. Depends on what day of winter it is, or what day of summer it is, if the air conditioners are going or the heaters are going. When I saw that literally 95% of the state gets powered by coal on the coldest day of the year, that opens your eyes a little bit about let's throw the baby out with the bathwater on these energy things. So do you know the breakdown or approximate ballpark? It's not a SAT quiz here, but
no, I wish I had those numbers in my head. I don't. But a good amount of our electricity comes from natural gas-fired power plants, of which we have in the state, although they're trying to force those to close. And we get quite a bit from Canadian hydropower, electric lines coming down. Nuclear, we nuclear power to some degree. I don't have the exact breakdown. If I were to guess,
I just pulled it up here. I just pulled it up here. So this is from 2001.
Yeah.
Natural gas, 45.6%. Nuclear, 25%. Hydropower, 22%.
Yeah.
Oil's a little bit around 1%. But solar, biomass, and wind, they make up 5%.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah. So a large, and that would be, my guess was going to be that natural gas is probably still in the pole position when it comes to what produces our electricity.
So what's the plan? I mean, is it hopefully that Niagara Falls will speed up? Is it to try to get 3 Mile Island and a 4 Mile Island? I mean, so you can get more nuclear energy there. 45% is about half of what powers the state of New York. Now, when you take a look at any city USA's energy grid, 65% of it is your emergency services, your hospitals, your fire departments, your police stations. So when you're talking about messing with energy policy, that's what goes first. That's what you're talking about. You're talking about emergency services you're messing with here. So that's the part that surprises me, that when the governor did this, I'm like, whoa, boy, what is this, a war on homelessness or a war on oil and gas here? Which one is this?
Well, there's a blueprint, a policy that was passed, a new law that was passed a few years ago that forces us towards zero emissions, net zero emissions by I think it's 2035, something like that. And so their plan is to try to force fossil energy out of business and as rapidly as possible increase wind and solar in particular. And offshore wind plays a role in that. They're trying to get some offshore wind set up at this point,
Still, huh?
and yeah, still, and solar as well. I mean, they're trying to they're carpeting every farm they can find to put a solar farm and solar installation. They're trying to do it, but there's going to be a gap is the problem. Even if you could do it, and I don't think you can. Solar and wind are by very definition they're unreliable sources, right? Natural gas and coal are 100% there all the time. Um,
You
what
could
if you
argue that wood is more reliable than wind and solar.
well, or you could say wind
No,
because
no, I mean wood.
biomass
Wood
is in there. Yeah,
is more
yeah,
reliable, and,
yeah,
and solar's hard.
yeah.
You really only get 6 hours a day. That makes up
Exactly.
about
Yes.
80 to
Yeah.
90% of your power,
Exactly. And
wind is
batteries
difficult too.
batteries are not here. So even if you had all of you took half of the farmland in the state, and it's a very rural state and upstate, and you carpeted it with wind and solar. Um, what do you do in the off hours? You have to be able to power things in the off hours, and battery technology is not there yet. There's just there's no way to do it. So when sooner or later they're going to hit a brick wall, and I think they're starting to see that now, and I think they're starting to back away from it. So I mean, just
My
there's
favorite talk radio argument for a long time when it came to solar energy is, hey, I love solar energy. We need to force every single homeowner to build their home facing south. And until you do that, there's no conversation about solar energy.
yeah,
And then people think I'm crazy. Like, you can't force somebody to build their house that way. Well, you're going to force them to do a lot of things.
yeah,
But if you force somebody to build their house facing passive solar energy, yeah, then their bills will go down by 50%, 70%, and those types of things.
yeah,
But that is like very too much control for people. They can't.
yeah.
They'll all have the same garbage can and they'll all face it the same way. But you start having
Right.
conversations like this, it's a little bit much. Do you think Trump will do anything?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm very excited about the incoming administration. Very in favor of it. Um, and it's a question I do get asked pretty regularly at this point. Hey, with Trump coming in, could he change New York, for instance? And what I have to say to that is, well, in 2020, in April of 2020, while the world was seized with pandemic, nightmare scenarios going on, and everyone was consumed with what was happening with the pandemic. Andrew Cuomo, our governor at that time, passed a state budget that included a permanent ban on water-based fracking. Um, so that ended any possibility unless and until you could challenge it in a court. And several people had tried to challenge it previous to that, unsuccessfully. Or you get a Republican governor and a Republican legislature. And with New York City, there's just no way you're ever going to have, say, a Republican assembly. It's not going to happen. So there's no way to overturn it. And then just a few weeks ago in December, Kathy Hochul signed a bill into law that bans carbon dioxide fracking, CO2 fracking, which would have been an alternative. You wouldn't have to use water. Okay, so let's take water out of the picture and all this water and our precious, surface water resources and all that. We'll just use carbon dioxide. It'll be captured. It'll be recirculated. It won't go into the atmosphere. Nope. It's just an absolute knee-jerk reaction. It just mischaracterize, what it was about. And the legislature passed a bill on that. She signed it into law. So, we have no, there is no future at this point in New York State. Um, so
How much
what
of
else?
the economy is that going to impact? Like how many jobs and how much, education tax money and,
Well,
um, I mean,
it's interesting you asked that. I ran a post today that included an article from the New York Post. An economist had published an article in the New York Post. I think it was last Friday, and he said, characterizing how much um, natural gas we have under us in the Marcellus and the Utica, sitting under us in New York State. These frack bans are essentially locking away about $1 trillion worth of economic benefit under our feet. $1 trillion. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how it's affecting the economy. I mean, no wonder why New York is, I think it's number one or number two in the United States for out migration. People are moving out of the state as fast as they can. And it's, in the area that I live. So I live in the Binghamton, New York area, which is just across the border. 15 miles that way is Pennsylvania and is Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania. Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania is the number one natural gas producing county in Pennsylvania. So, what does that tell you about how much gas is on this side of the border? I mean, we have a bounty here if we could only tap it, but we can't. So, with Trump coming in, what does that do? Well, it helps Pennsylvania and it helps West Virginia and Ohio, and I'm sure North Dakota and these other states. Because what will happen is we'll have a new leader of the EPA. So, and he comes from New York, actually, Lee Zeldin, and he's a great guy. He's very conservative, and he'll do good work at the EPA. He'll work to roll back some of the onerous regulations that the Biden EPA put into place. And those regulations do things like make it harder to build pipelines. They make it harder to build gas-fired power plants. And if we can relax some of those onerous over the top regulations and give those things some breathing space, then what'll happen is then we can start to move our gas into other markets, or we can create new markets right here. Right? Every gas-fired power plant is a huge user of natural gas. So if we could build a half a dozen or a dozen new gas-fired power plants here in the Northeast, I mean, that would be huge, and it would lead to more drilling. It would raise prices a bit because there's more demand for the gas. And every time, the price goes up some, you get more drilling. And the same with pipelines. If we could pipe this stuff out of the area, more to the Midwest, more to the Southeast, more to the Southwest, the Gulf Coast, where there are a lot of export facilities. We could even build another export facility somewhere along the Atlantic. Um, all of those things are, in my mind, are distinctly more possible with Donald Trump. Is it an overnight thing? No. Sadly, unfortunately, but give it a year or two and I think we're going to be heading in the right direction here. So I'm very encouraged by Trump. I think that and another thing that he could do potentially is get LNG by rail back online again. He almost had that up and running before he left office, and Biden, the Biden administration, various departments, PHMSA and some of these other organizations they squashed it. They prevented any LNG by rail. So, hey, if we don't have a pipeline, let's put in a little liquefaction plant and we'll stick it on a rail car and send it, if we need to. So, it's the equivalent of
are
an
you
oil.
guys doing, are you doing any carbon sequestration there? Any carbon capture?
Starting to, yeah, starting
Starting
to.
to.
Yep.
Let me ask you this.
In Pennsylvania, West
Yeah,
Virginia, Ohio. Yeah.
well, a lot of the states are because it's being driven by the government. The
Right.
government's funding it. They're
Right.
picking the research centers, and they're using public-private partnerships and corporations. And really, at the end of the day, the carbon industry is becoming the new marker for the
Yeah.
economy and our quality of life. And so I was curious if they're using the same template in New York that they're using in Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Kansas, trying to think, Ohio, where
Yeah.
the government gives the billions of dollars in the project to the research. The research works with public-private partnerships who work essentially with the corporations, and then that's this ecosystem of either, some call it a wealth transfer, some are calling it a kind of a stripping away of the oil and gas industry's power that they've had, much like the railroad had back in the day
Right.
when they controlled the planet. You know, and there ain't nothing new under the sun. Something's going to control the planet, and now we're evolving into a world where carbon seems to be the marker for the quality of life and for our kind of our economy. So, yeah, talk to me a little bit about what's happening in the carbon industry.
Well, still, it's in its infancy at this point. I know that Pennsylvania is working on getting permission, authorizations, certification, I guess is the word, from the EPA to so that the government regulatory function comes down to the state level as opposed to the EPA when it comes to approving carbon injection wells. I think they're class 6 wells,
Mm-hmm.
as I recall, something like that. So, and it's called oh,
Are you talking about like a primacy? You're talking about
primacy.
primacy?
That's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So
Pennsylvania's
North
is
Dakota has it. Yes.
exactly, exactly. And so we're still in our infancy, right? We're not even there yet, where North Dakota is. And Pennsylvania is working on primacy. West Virginia is working on primacy. I believe Ohio is as well. So that these wells that they expect to come online will, it'll be a shorter path to getting those wells online. As for, how much of it is, public private and all that, I, I haven't read a lot about, specific plans. I've seen a few. There's one in Western Pennsylvania that's a combination. Uh, it's not only CCS, carbon sequestration stuff, but it's also they're also getting gas out of the ground and a few other things. It's all kind of wrapped up in one big project. Um, but it's in this neck of the woods, I'd say it's still pretty much in its infancy.
Yeah. Um, North Dakota was the first state to get the primacy, so it was right in my backyard. All these different projects,
Yeah.
and we've had a very good relationship with Dr. Lauren Scott out of Louisiana, and Louisiana I think was either second or third, I can't remember. And then of course the state of Wyoming, Governor Mark Gordon is a regular guest on the program, and so yeah, we've been around it, and in theory it's a good idea, but the so far they haven't got the technology there. The amount of investment is astronomical.
Yeah.
And I said this by accident yesterday, last night. We were doing a review of Landman,
Hmm.
and I can't remember how I said it, but the way it came out was the oil and gas industry had better be very careful because this carbon industry might turn out to be like wind and solar, where it's all hype and you get no results. But hey, keep giving
Yeah.
us more money, keep giving us more money, and pretty soon they're not going to be very well liked like they were before. You're nodding
Yeah.
your head, Jim, so you know what I'm talking about.
No, it's I keep saying, where's the beef? I don't,
Yeah.
that old Wendy's commercial. I mean, it's like, I haven't seen, other than the fact that a lot of people have pledged allegiance to it and said, that there are certain plants, refineries and things that are producing carbon, and they want to get rid of it. That big pipeline they want to run out your way, to hook up to a bunch of different processing plants out there. I forget what it's called, but um, okay, I
Hey,
just don't see the clamoring, And I'll tell you another one that's along the same lines in my mind is hydrogen. The government has
green,
pledged a
green
lot of
or
money,
blue?
well, of any stripe, right? Um, so the Biden administration did, what I called the hydrogen Hunger Games, and they
Good
awarded
name.
these huge stipends, of close to $1 billion to 7 different projects. Well, two of those are out here in this neck of the woods. One is headquartered in Delaware, but takes in part of like Philadelphia in that area, and that was green hydrogen. That project. But the other is it's called Arch Two, and it's basically headquartered in West Virginia, and it's aimed squarely at the Marcellus and Utica, and it's supposed to use our gas, our natural gas. So it's a blue hydrogen kind of a thing. So blue hydrogen, for those who may not be up to speed on that, is you produce 95% of all hydrogen today is produced by cracking natural gas. And so if you happen to capture the carbon dioxide that is produced when you crack it, then it goes from what's called gray, and it's natural, they call it gray hydrogen, dirty hydrogen, whatever you want to call it, to becoming blue hydrogen because you've captured and you store that carbon dioxide. Well, I've been reading about this and reporting on it for quite a while, and there are some advances here and there, but again, there's no clamoring for, gee, I'd rather use hydrogen than natural gas. First of all, you can't flow 100% hydrogen in a natural gas pipeline. It doesn't work. The pipelines leak like sieves when it comes to hydrogen because it's much lighter. And the valves and everything, the way it's connected, and you can't burn it in your furnace at home or use it in your stove, your cook stove, without special adaptations. You have to, basically, you'd have to spend a whole bunch of money to retrofit or to buy new appliances in order to burn it. So, again, the government's pushing it, and there's all this talk and there's all this hype. Where's the beef? I just don't see the demand for it yet, and I'm wondering if it'll ever really develop. To be honest with you.
What, what's happening with that Shell cracker plant that opened up 6 months ago, or probably almost a year ago? Maybe it was it about
It was a year
last
ago. Yeah,
February, March? Yeah, last
yeah,
February is when I think I remember.
yeah.
What's there were some protesters and
Yep.
or they were not neighborly. They were butting heads with their neighbors. What happened with that?
Well, it's up and running, and it's
Okay.
producing plastic, on a regular basis. The little pellets that it was designed to do. Um, it was unfortunately it was an uneven start for the cracker. They had some technical problems, and there were a number of times when the plant had to flare, had to shut down, like emergency shutdown, and they ended up flaring and things like that. And it, scares the neighbors. I mean, at night, lights up the night sky. It's a huge plant, and it was in it, and there were emissions coming out of it that were higher than were supposed to be, supposedly. So they got clipped pretty good with, millions of dollars worth of fines and all sorts of, new monitoring that has to happen and stuff like that. My sense is that it's settled down now, and they've addressed a lot of those issues, and I think it's going a lot better than it did initially. But it's a huge, economically, it's a huge benefit to Western Pennsylvania in that area and to the drillers in the Marcellus and Utica because it's using the ethane that we produce. And, behind methane, ethane is the number two, hydrocarbon that's coming out of our wells over in this area. So,
And that still employs quite a bit of people. Those
oh yeah,
facilities do, don't they? It's not
oh
robots
yeah.
yet, is it?
No, no, no. It's I want to say 600 or 700 people, I think, full-time
Yeah,
positions
that's
that work
that's
at the
something
plant.
that
Yeah.
the governor
It
needs to remember is that
Yep.
those are good
It
paying
took it
jobs
took
and
over
keep
5,000
communities
people
going.
took over 5,000 people to actually build it. That was temporary, but temporary was, 3 years. So
That's pretty good. It's better than a
yeah,
stimulus check after, one time. I mean, it's 3 years of a stimulus into a community is better than a one-time deal. But hey,
yeah,
so
I heard that. I
go ahead.
used to hear there was way back when there was still the potential for a new pipeline to come in this area. It's called the Constitution Pipeline. It was going to run, from Pennsylvania into New York. I went to a FERC scoping hearing, and I'll never forget. There was a welder there, from the union, there to support it, to speak in support of it. And he got up and said, he said, we hear this all the time that these jobs are temporary jobs. He said, you know what? He said, I've been working these temporary jobs for the past 20 years, and I've put 3 kids through college, on temporary jobs, quote unquote. So that anyway, I thought that was interesting.
It's a good point. I mean, hey, all of my contracts I have technically is a temporary job
Right.
because it's who knows if they're going to redo them when they're all said and done. But
That's right.
so the governor of New York, we're talking about a ban on water fracking, a
Yeah.
ban on CO2 fracking.
Yeah.
Now, Liberty, the company Liberty, where the CEO is now the new energy secretary, I'm assuming he gets
Yeah.
through the
Hmm.
nomination process, and
Yep.
it doesn't seem like there's any reason that won't happen. Liberty was doing an electric frack.
Yeah.
Now, is that anything that could be, slide under, a technicality there? Could that open up, Liberty
Um,
to fracking in New York, or no? Just the word
no,
frack is out.
no, yeah, the electric part is what powers the pumps. So,
Yeah.
but the pumps still have to pump something. So if it's not water, it has to be CO2. Something has to go
Kool-Aid.
down the hole in order to blow into the cracks and to open that up. So the electric fracking, which we have a lot of in the Marcellus and Utica, there's some of our drillers have only e-fracs. And
Okay.
the main difference is um, regular fracking uses diesel engines in order to create the electricity to power the pumps. Um,
Hmm.
E-fracking uses natural gas right off from the pad or the next pad over, somewhere nearby, and uses and burns that natural gas to produce the electricity to power the pumps. And so it's far fewer pumps. They're a lot quieter. So environmentally speaking, it's very much it's much better for the environment overall.
How do you think Chris Wright will do as energy secretary? Do you think he'll be good for the industry?
Yeah, I do. I think he'll be fantastic. I mean, he is. everything I've read about him, I've never interviewed him, and I've never had the opportunity to sort of, you know, uh, dug in. I mean, I've heard of his company. I've looked at that a little bit, but anyone that's in that kind of position, it's just it's got to be a plus, right? And if you read his bio, I mean, he also has experience in, I think, nuclear and something else. I mean, he's the real deal. I mean, it's not just oil and gas. I mean, he knows energy inside and out. So I think he'll be fantastic, actually.
Apologize if you're wondering what I was just doing there. I had to move because the internet was not working very good in my area. So I
Oh,
had to shift positions here quickly into the different
sure.
areas. That's what happens when it gets really cold. Things work differently. The air, I mean, have you ever seen an airport and like freezing temperature? It's like a lightsaber shooting straight up in the air. It's so cold it captures the molecules. The other day it
Yeah.
was so cold here where I am, the diesel trucks were gelling up on the interstate. That's how
Oh,
cold it is. I mean, can you imagine being that cold? You got a hot engine and it's still not, still just, oh man, those poor people with arthritis. That's all I can think of. Can't even imagine what their lives are like with, oof.
well, what
Any,
what we have out in this neck of the woods is called lake effect snow,
oh
and
yeah,
the air comes across Lake Ontario or Lake Erie, and one of the Great Lakes, and if you happen to be on the east side of that, you can get pounded. So about an hour and 45 minutes from here, near Utica, New York, over the weekend, there was one small hamlet there that got 67 inches of snow over the weekend. So
wow.
it can get pretty hairy. So it's not
I
cold
spent
like there.
a weekend up in, no, in fact, when I was in Albany, New York, it was
Yeah,
the first time I really saw vertical snow. In my
yeah,
part of the world, it's always horizontal snow. It's
yeah,
always
yeah,
falling horizontally. And
yeah,
I'll tell you what, there was about a foot of snow in a half an hour. It's so
yeah,
fluffy and it just keeps
yeah,
stacking up and stacking
yeah,
up and
yeah,
everything. So it's a different type of snow and a different type of just winter problem versus
yeah.
the sheer air temperature cold and all everything else. But well, what else is happening out in the Marcellus? I mean, there's a lot going on out there. We have a new election. You basically Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York is essentially what the Marcellus, Appalachia consists of. I guess there's a little bit down in what would it be, the Virginias, or what would it be, the southern parts, the West Virginia?
Yeah, yep, down into yeah, definitely West Virginia, even down into Virginia a little bit.
Oh, there is a little
Over,
bit down there. Okay.
yeah, over into, might reach over into Kentucky a little bit, along the edges, kind of a thing. But basically, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio are the primary areas, and then of course New York. But we don't do any drilling here. So I
So
guess the
essentially, you got New York trying to, do some regulations.
what, what
Pennsylvania is always kind of open, and Ohio is kind of usually open too.
yeah,
But
yeah.
go on. Sorry. Yeah.
Um, one of the bigger stories over the past year or two has been the ascendance of crude in Ohio. Believe it or not, it's condensate. It's a very light, sweet crude that's produced. But a company called Encino Energy kind of cracked the code on it, about a year and a half ago or so. And EOG Resources, which is a big driller in multiple plays, I think even in the Bakken, is has a bunch of acreage, like close to 500,000 acres in Ohio now. And there are a few others, and they're really going after it. And they're starting to produce some pretty significant quantities of crude condensate over in the eastern part of Ohio, the Ohio Utica. So that's pretty interesting story. That yeah, it was once upon a time Aubrey McClendon, when he was at Chesapeake, said famously that the Utica would be the biggest thing to hit Ohio since maybe the plow. And
Hmm.
he was right, but he couldn't figure out, and many people couldn't figure out because of the lift issue, how to get it out of the ground. And finally, Encino and some others now in their footsteps have figured that out. And so it's becoming oil, oil, crude, condensate is becoming a very important part of at least the Utica. So that's interesting, what's happening. But, up in Pennsylvania and other places, the sad truth is there's just, drilling has stagnated. I think last year was the first year that Pennsylvania may have gone down just a shade in their natural gas production. And the reason is prices. The prices have been in the tank, and until prices get above three and head a little bit higher, they're curtailing, they're shutting in, they're not drilling new wells. Coterra Energy, which used to be Cabot Oil and Gas, you remember Dimmick, from Gasland, that's Cabot Oil and Gas.
Hmm.
Um, they completely stopped all new drilling in the Marcellus. Cabot joint merged with another company with what was the name? Can't remember it off the top of my head. And they have a lot of assets in the Permian and in the Anadarko in Oklahoma, and so they're just they're going to put their money into oil drilling for now. They're not going to do any more gas drilling until the prices come up. So that's been kind of discouraging for many people. But again, with Trump coming in, it just seems like there's some hope, that's starting to stir again. And prices have been higher. We're having a cold winter. Gotta love those cold. I don't love the cold winter, but on a personal level, but on a professional level, it's great. The colder it is, the better it is, and the higher those prices are going to go on natural gas. And as they go higher and stay higher, there will be more drilling. So, and that's a good thing.
So, super light crude oil production in eastern Ohio in the
Yes,
Utica shale play,
yes,
and that's been. I know you've covered it for the last few years, so that's kind of taking off a little bit now, huh?
it is. It really is. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And how much is there much refining that needs to be done? Like in the Bakken, for example, the stuff you pull right out of the ground, you can put into a diesel engine and it'll work. It'll smoke
Yeah,
like crazy, but that's how refined it is coming out of the ground.
yeah.
When I see the super light crude, that's what it reminds me of. Is it a pretty refined product or?
Well, I don't know for sure. I mean, that part of the industry is not necessarily my expertise,
Sure, sure.
but from my understanding, from what I've read, there are refineries in the Midwest that take it and that handle it.
Hmm.
And I think I mean, you just when you look at pictures of it, in the jar, I mean, it looks like it's amber.
That,
It's
that's what
not
I was looking at. It,
it's
it,
it's, it's
it
not
looks
black.
it looks
It's not
very
black like,
much the
but
color
it's
like the
amber
Bakken.
like just like yeah. So it probably like yours. You could probably if it probably needs a minimal amount of refining, but I don't know for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to look into that a little bit because that's what I was looking at the uh, MarcellusDrilling.com here. There's a story: super light crude production takes off in eastern Ohio's Utica shale
Yeah.
play. There's a picture
Yeah.
there, and as I mentioned, it reminded me very much of that amber Bakken colored, and that was one of the just real specialties of the Bakken was that it was just so they call it sweet crude or something like
Yeah.
that. But
Yep. Light
um,
sweet crude. Yeah.
yeah, well, I appreciate the update today.
Sure.
Anything we missed out on? Any previews coming up on your news site as we wrap up here?
Well, I don't know, just a quick shameless self plug. I've been working on a data product, and I'll be releasing that hopefully by the end of January. And that takes a look at some of the higher level information of, county by county, who is doing the drilling, how much are they producing, by driller, by township. But then I'm also going to include right down to the well level and look at individual wells over the past year, and essentially a little mini decline curve, like how are they doing? Are they producing more? Are they producing less? And I'm hoping that a couple different people can use information like that. I think they can. One would be, of course, people in the industry that want to know what's happening, with their competitors and around them. Another are landowners, and they want to know, there's always this push and pull. We're partners with the drillers, but there's always a push and pull. Are these people screwing me over? Are they, my royalty check went way down. They're saying that the production's down. Did they curtail it? What's going on? Well, I'll be able to give them, here's what that well produced, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. And they'll be able to check in on it and try to match that with their royalty checks and see, if anything, if they should be concerned about anything. So I'm excited about that, to get that launched up here pretty soon.
Are you charging for that?
I'll charge for that.
And
absolutely.
Is that a subscription or a one-time fee, or how does that work?
It'll be a yearly subscription.
Okay. Do you get a football
Yep.
phone with it, like Sports Illustrated?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
But I'll be updating it,
Mhm.
with permit information on a monthly basis and with production information on a quarterly basis, down to the well. So
No, it's a really good idea. I knew some people who did it in the Bakken,
yeah,
and they ended up selling it to a bank. A bank bought it from them,
yeah,
to be honest,
yeah,
because customers, I mean, it wasn't an oil company that bought it. It was a bank. It's because
right,
it was, as you mentioned, there's a lot of property and mineral owners that need to know
yeah,
this information. It's not the
sure,
companies as much as it is the actual,
yeah,
people.
yep,
So good for you.
yep,
Good for you. We'll make sure we'll have you back on to let people know where they can get
right,
it and get the links up
absolutely,
and all
yep,
that fun stuff. So
yep,
Marcellus Drilling, and it'll be available there too.
yep, sure will,
Awesome.
yep.
Well, Mr. Jim Willis, thank you much for the time today. Any final plugs, thoughts, or anything?
Just drill, baby, drill. That's that's the refrain.